Hello and welcome to another informative episode of iCurrent Affairs, where we give you updates of top-notch events happening in and around the country. Today we are in Ebukhosini Solutions to attend the workshops of how to teach African history as we celebrate Black History Month. More and more of us realize the importance to know and teach African history, but where do we begin? How can we teach African history to our families, organizations, and even our communities? This workshop is an introduction to people who would love to know more about how to teach, which resources to use, and how to communicate our history, more especially to the young audience. I am Utility Kumalo, the one and only Crazy T, and you are tuned into our current affairs on Oha Tv. Keep it locked. Africa, my lovely place. As you can see, we are enjoying ourselves, singing music, African music, civilization. Africa is one. Oh yes, everyone is having fun. Ebukhosini.
Without wasting any more time, ladies and gentlemen, please give your hands together for the great Dr. Baba Buntu.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Sanbunani, Dumelang, Ekaro. Greetings to everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to be part of this important seminar. As you know, our topic is how to teach African history. And because we're a bit behind time, I will speak very fast and I will talk about a lot of things and you'll be confused.
So namhlanje we are gathered here at Ebukhosini Solutions for a Black History Month seminar, which was basically focused on how to teach Black history, because we find Black history is an important subject, African history is an important subject, but we do not receive it in the normal schools as we should.
I want my kids to grow in an African way. So in order to find the knowledge that I must give to my kids, I have to be in these such spaces where we unlearn and relearn about who we are, so that we can pass that message and knowledge to the upcoming ones, so that they can grow with self-confidence, loving themselves as Africans.
So unlearning is to have a critical mind, is to think, okay, is Nelson Mandela our biggest hero, for instance? And when we feel that's a controversial question, that's what we should ask. Why is that a controversial question? Because it shouldn't be at all. Was Jesus black? And some of us have learned that if you ask that question, there's something really wrong with you, and we belong to families that look a certain way at us if we can even dare to ask such a question. The response, at least in my mind, is always, why should that be a controversial question? For a people that have struggled with color for the last 1,000 years, we have to ask these questions. We are curious. We want to know. Other people of color, other black people have done 1, 2, 3. We want to know because we're hungry for our knowledge.
I think it's important that as Africans, we have to have such spaces to come and reflect and look at our current situations as well as the past situations, because we've been caged so much. You see, colonization did something to us that it separated us. Yazi ngesizulu bathi sike sihlale nje sibe nembizo sizikhulume thina njengabantu.
We as Africans, we must always have similar sessions like this to always remember or remind ourselves of whom we are.
They were really enjoyable. I really liked what they were talking about. I learned a lot today. The things we do, we should do it our own way, in an African way. We shouldn't copy what other people are doing.
So I can learn more about my religion and know more about Africans and how they live and all those things.
So as much as we say we like critical thinking, many critical thinkers are not liked. Because you are the one that is bothersome. You are the one that is irritating. You are the one who always, man, can we just enjoy ourselves? No, we cannot. That's what the critical thinker would say. So so basically what this also means is that you need to create a love for reading.
We know that we have to teach this to our children because our education system doesn't really give us African-centered education. So we have to be the first school for our babies.
I guess the tricky part is that you can't just go through a period of unlearning and then you can start to relearn. It's like you have to do it in between each other. And it's two very opposing processes, because unlearning is critical questions and being, you always ask these questions. Can't you just sit quiet and just, this unlearning process is when you go to a movie and 10 minutes into you see the black man is being killed first. This is a symbol of and people are like, no, it's just a movie, man. What's your problem? Exactly. There's a symbol. There's a story in there.
It is so important to know who we are as Africans. So these sessions are really helping us to start to identify ourselves. Who are we as Africans and where do we come from?
As a reference point. And that's why we need to know history. Not to go back, but to understand that we come from somewhere.
And today we were told about the different authors, different authors that have written the real, actual and accurate history. So I have to look for those authors and the books that they've written, go out there, search for them and then find those books and even read it myself and then start to share that information with my family.
We need to read a lot so that we can understand about our knowledge and that we must also try and pass that knowledge to our kids. So it's what I'm trying to do every day. So today it was just to add on some points that I didn't know because we're always learning every day.
Pan-Africanism was the idea that as African people speaking different languages and having many differences between us, we also have a commonality in history. That means we have a commonality also in what we experience, and we should then also have a collective aim of changing the world for the betterment of all of us.
Then we go through these institutions and we have to throw away our Africanness, we have to throw away our language, even our hair textures, our facial features, we have to get them out of the way. And once we've gone through that process and we've been processed, like we come through the factory, and we're like everybody else, one, we don't have none of those outcomes, and two, we've lost who we are.
I know we use the term African, we use the term black, and we expect that we all mean the same. But I often realize that when we go deeply into it, we might not actually mean the same. We live in a society where people that just 10, 15 years ago would not even think about being African or being associated with African now say that I am African. I'm talking about white people, Indian people, people who we normally look at as not being African. How do we deal with that?
Sometimes we talk about you hear someone say, when you go to the knowledge of our forefathers. Yeah, and for me, it's like a reminder, like, our foreparents, because fathers will take us that role that we are talking about, the image and understanding more of men, and that on its own, as much as it can look as it's tiring, but when we balance and bring justice, we need to now consciously talk in the way that what we want to build, our foreparents, not forefathers.
We spend a lot of time defining what is African. And as Ebukhosini, just to clarify, I think we come from a very clear and inclusive understanding that people who are black, people who are indigenous from this continent are African people. Whether they were born somewhere else, whether they speak a different language, even if they say, I hate being black, that's an African lost person.
There were a few unexpected, very, very, very valuable information that I was not aware of. I mean, like your certain phrases and words and how to contextualize it, or when addressing the African problem, basically, and it was value add, cool. I love the term decoloniality. I mean, it fills my mouth up. I'm struggling to pronunciate it. Can we think of something simpler? It's because now, I mean, you spoke of it of an ideology of someone PhD, presenting to 10-year-olds. I'm talking from that perspective because, I mean, I always find myself in situations where I find myself literally talking now about this point that you're talking about. And most people end up sitting there going, what is it going on about?
Decolonization is a discussion that is being held. And we should come in and say, actually, can I just point a correction? It's not called decolonization. It's called in Tswana, in Spedi, we would have those words. But we need to do some work as a collective to get to that. And I think that this is a very opportune time when many, especially young people, are really craving for this information. But, and here's the reminder, and thank you for bringing it very close. two young ladies that used to work with us, and they were very woke and very radical and very interested in knowledge. And they're both Xhosa speaking. And they decided that today, because they used to engage with people everywhere they went in the taxi, they just control the conversation. Let's talk about racism. Let's talk about what's happening with us. And then they said, today we're only going to talk in isiXhosa. And I think they lasted 20 minutes. Oh. Meaning that we need to be careful of, this is where the wokeness comes in. Because many of us now start to speak this language. Say, you see, you need to break it down. This is white privilege. This is what. And we can say things that others say, I never thought about that. But how do we bring it home?
It's very important in that there's a lot of richness and there's a lot of knowledge and history in our languages. That when we don't speak our languages, we lose, and we inherit other cultures and histories that we cannot really relate to all the time and are not part of who we are.
Negritude is a movement that started in the 30s in France, and it was the meeting of different French-speaking Africans from the Francophone world that met, and some theories, especially around culture and identity, were developed. I'm mentioning them in line because each one built on the previous one.
As African people, we do know that ancestral spirit are a big part of being African. So for me, what gives me the courage to actually say, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be African, is because I always imagine the Africa that could have been had we not been colonized. Yeah.
We need to talk about our occupation, 1400 to 1800, but actually we occupied much before that. And when we talk about enslavement, we must never forget to start with Arab-led slavery. Because the reason Europeans could be so successful in enslavement was that they followed a template that had already been worked out. They just made it super efficient, to say it from their side. But we had been enslaved by Arabs for a very, very long time, and millions of people had been killed and taken out of their communities already when Europeans started. And we must not believe the history books when they say that about 12 million people were transported to the other side. You see, that's a number that is counted from the side of the oppressor. They gained, in a way, they gained 12 million people, enslaved Africans. We lost close to 100 million people. You understand the difference? We need to count who we lost. We need to count who was no longer part of our communities because they were stolen away, but they only want to count who survived, who came over there alive to work for them. So they don't count the people who drowned, people who fell off the boats, people who resisted, people who fought and then were killed. They don't count them. We need to count them.
If I can start with a quote by the great Marcus Garvey, he says, "A people without knowledge of their history is like a tree without roots." You are alive physically, but inside you don't know who you are. Just to also play around with what Steve Biko says, we need to bring life back into our bodies and not longer just be a shell, but be black within the inside and the outside as well.
So for me, I don't see the relevance, and personally, I don't see any need for us as African people, as we're still struggling to find ourselves, to open up the gates and say anyone who feels African should be African. It doesn't make sense. We're still defining ourselves. We're still finding our history. We don't have time right now. So sit and wait. We'll call you if we need you.
I found, it was really good. I learned quite a lot of new things that I had not learned of before, so it was definitely worth my time.
The journey is not easy.
Yeah.
I was listening to his experience and also the interaction from the people.
Yes.
So I always want to do what he's doing anyway. So I found out now it's not easy, but it's doable.
So we are a company, a community-based company that has been in existence since 2002. And we do... our main passion is education and African-centered education. So we engage communities in different learning journeys. We mentor people, we do workshops, we do learning journeys, we produce knowledge material, we learn from elders, we introduce knowledgeable people to others who would like to know. And we believe that as African people, we need to work very hard to regain and reclaim our knowledge. But at the same time, I also need to say that it's very challenging because many of us are so removed from our knowledge that we're not even interested anymore. So even when we say we're doing this and that, people are saying, I'm not so sure, I'm not so interested in that. So it's hard to wake up a people that feel okay to be asleep.
Teaching how to teach African history. Why that?
Because we find that many people are interested in African history, but many feel a bit intimidated by actually teaching it. So they feel that as a parent, I'm not sure if I should teach my child because I'm not an expert. What if I teach the wrong things? I run a youth program or a community program. Can I really bring in African knowledge there? Maybe I'm not so equipped. So it was to kind of remind people that they can start from a space, they can learn more where to get information from, and that they should also be encouraged to bring this knowledge into every space they are, even businesses, even community meetings. We need to talk about African history and knowledge all the time.
We are an African people.
We are an African people.
We will remember the humanity.
We will remember the humanity.
Glory and suffering.
Glory and suffering.
Of our ancestors.
Of our ancestors.
And honor the struggle of our elders.
And honor the struggle of our elders.
We will strive to bring new values.
We will strive to bring new values.
And new life to our people.
And new life to our people.
We will have peace and harmony among us.
We will have peace and harmony among us.
We will be loving, sharing, and creative.
We will be loving, sharing, and creative.
We will study and work.
We will study and work.
So we may learn.
So we may learn.
We will listen and remember.
We will listen and remember.
So we may teach.
So we may teach.
We will cultivate self-reliance.
We will cultivate self-reliance.
We will struggle to resurrect.
We will struggle to resurrect.
And unify our continent.
And unify our continent.
Mama Africa.
Mama Africa.
We will raise many children for our nation.
We will raise many children for our nation.
We will have discipline, patience.
We will have discipline, patience.
Devotion, respect, and courage.
Devotion, respect, and courage.
We will live as modest people.
We will live as modest people.
Defend our community.
Defend our community.
And provide new direction for our people.
And provide new direction for our people.
We will be free and self-determining.
We will be free and self-determining.
We are an African people.
We are an African people.
We will win.
We will win.
We will win.
We will win.
Harambe!